Hey guys, project-zodiac here. I'm back with another video, and basically I'm gonna make this as a third part to my Xenoblade Retells the Perfect Work story two-part video that I did earlier this year. The reason for that is because I just beat Xenoblade 3, and I kind of realized a couple of other things when I beat Xenoblade 3, but before I even realized those things, I did think it would be cool to kind of take a look and see how Xenoblade 3's ending would have looked like if it was in Xenogears, given that each part is a retelling. So after I beat the game though, I realized a couple other things and I just really had to make this video. So with all that said, this is gonna have spoilers for every single Xenoblade game, for Xenogears, and then for every single Xeno Saga game. Like as in big ending spoilers for all of them. So with all that said, let's just get into this. So basically, when Xenogears came out, it was a very different game than what was out at the time, and even basically compared to what is out now. Now, one of the reasons why is basically just because of how grand this game was in terms of story and gameplay. But one thing that shocked so many people was that the end of the game, it basically said that it was part 5. So this huge complex story was only the 5th part of something, but of what? Of how many other parts? Sadly, those questions would not be answered, as those other parts would not be made. The reason for this is because Squaresoft decided to not make any more sequels or prequels to Xenogears. So we were basically left with a huge question on what would have happened in the full Xenogears story. Now, that is until 2 years later when the art book for Xenogears was released. This art book was called Perfect Works, and in this art book there was a 2-page spread that has a timeline of the Xenogears series, and some pretty good descriptions of the other parts of Xenogears as well. And most of our questions were answered, but we saw that the story is a 6-part long epic saga spanning many thousands of years, and while parts 1 and 5 got a lot of clear information on them, the final part did not. It was very small and very ambiguous in what part 6 would have been. So we were basically left to wonder for years on what that part would have looked like, and also what the other parts would have looked like outside of their summaries. But now, thankfully, over 20 years later, we finally have seen the entire story, and we've seen it over 2 different retellings. In one way, we did not even really realize that we had been told the full story because it was basically rushed, and in the other it was told with no compromises. But with that said, if the full story was told, how does it end? And what do I mean by the entire story was told over 2 different retellings instead of 1? Well, let's go with the one retelling of the story that tells the story uncompromised in any way, and that is with Xenoblade Chronicles as a whole. The one that shows part 6, that's Xenoblade Chronicles 3. As Xenoblade Chronicles 3 shows us what that 6th part would have looked like, but again, the Xenoblade version of it. But since Xenoblade is a retelling or a reimagining of Perfect Works, how much of it would have actually made it into the original Xenogears part 6? Well, given that the other Xenoblade games have the same main ideas and summaries for parts 1 through 5 of Perfect Works, it's safe to say that Xenoblade 3's main ideas would be the basis for Xenogears Part 6. But after beating Xenoblade 3, I realized that a lot of what was happening in it is very similar to something we've seen before, and that is with Xeno Saga Episode 3. Xeno Saga was another attempt, the first attempt at retelling the Perfect Works story, and the one that was rushed. Like Xenogears and like Xenoblade, that is if you count Torna and Future Connected, but not the Xenoblade 3 DLC story, as we don't know when that takes place or what it's even about. But Xeno Saga was supposed to be 6 games. First, the very first game had to basically be split into 2 episodes, mostly due to budget. So episode 2 of Xeno Saga is technically just a little bit more of episode 1. But because of this and with some other issues, episode 2 had to move things around in what it included and did not include from the overall story. So in a way, they were already changing the direction that the story was going to go to due to these issues. And even though the first game did really well, the second game did not. And it was then decided that episode 3 would be the last one. So they had to rework everything else even more so to be in this one game and to have a conclusion. So when I first played the game, Xeno Saga as a whole that is, I did know about this, but I wasn't sure if the ending that we would be getting in Xeno Saga Episode 3 before I got to it, or even after I beat Xeno Saga Episode 3, I wasn't sure if that ending was just the ending that they went with, or if that was the ending of Part 6 as a whole. And honestly, I never really thought about it because I thought it was just supposed to cover parts 1 through 3 basically. So I really suggest that you do see that original video I made, that first part, because I do go into more detail at where Xeno Saga technically retells for the most part. And now, after playing Xenoblade 3, I can kind of see that I guess we did have Part 6 ending the entire time, ever since Xenosaga 3 that is. Though in that game it is rushed in a way, and it does try to add a lot of things from the other parts that it couldn't tell in a longer format, so it's basically parts 3 to 6 mixed together. And it is also slightly different than the ending that we got in Xenoblade 3, as opposed to all of the other parts from Xenosaga and Xenoblade and Xenogears, basically being almost very close retellings of one another. So with these two things in mind, I think we might actually know now the main concept of what could have been the original Part 6. First, let's see what Part 6 says. Basically, it says that Part 6 starts soon after Part 5, and that it is the end of Xenogears' world, and that information that was held back would be revealed. But it also says that it's an undeveloped episode, so that kind of means that at that point in time, they did not have a full idea of what would be happening in Part 6 other than those points. Now, given that it's been 20 years since then and we have Xenoblade 3, it does seem like they did flesh out their ideas with this part, especially given what is in the ending of Xenosaga 3. But the question still remains, how would the original Part 6 have looked like? What would have been the other main points for this part? To answer that, let's take a look at the ending for Xenosaga 3 and Xenoblade 3 before we theorize on what the other main points would have looked like for the original Part 6. Let's start with Xenoblade 3. Xenoblade 3 definitely has those points that are listed in Part 6. It is set directly after Part 5, which is Xenoblade 1 and 2, in a way, and it is basically set about 20 years after the end of those games, but it spans thousands of years. And if you count Future Connected as part of Part 6, then that's at 1 year after both games. And basically that pushes the story to Xenoblade 3, which is the main event of Part 6. There's also the point that Xenoblade 3's world is actually ending due to the two worlds merging, and there is important information that is held back, such as the reincarnation, the endless loop, the Mobius situation, and so on. But let's talk a little bit about those things, as that is basically what is actually similar to Xenosaga 3's ending. In Xenoblade 3, the people of the two universes are scared that Origin won't work, and some other things trouble them as well. And basically they fear that they're gonna die. So due to their fear, Zed is created as a manifestation of their fear. He becomes a lower power and comes in when he thinks a higher power is not present, even though it is, because we see it talking with Noah when Noah somewhat dies. With that said, Zed sees humans as a benefit to himself. He makes Ionios, a world stuck in a single second, but that second goes on for thousands of years and many lifetimes. It is stuck in an endless second, the endless now. He does this basically to save humans from their fears of death and from the worlds merging together. But he also turns this world into one of mindless manipulation and fear, so he can basically feed on the fear and pain of humans in order to power himself up. And as he does this, with the help of the other Mobius, who are people that have died and been reborn by him and given power. The game basically ends with people breaking free of the endless now, the worlds merging, and everyone brought back to life, and they're basically on Earth again. But now let's look at the summary for Xenosaga Episode 3. It is set a few years after the last episode, about 2 years, and in it information is revealed. Basically, that information is where the lower domain and the upper domain of existence are both set to crash and destroy the lower domain, and even if the upper domain is saved, the lower domain will still be destroyed, and from the wills of the people in the lower domain, Wilhelm was created as a way to save the lower domain. And he does this with the help of the Testaments, who are people who have died but been reborn in a way with a power that people just don't have. What Wilhelm does though is that he puts the universe in a continuous loop where when the domains are about to crash, the universe resets and everyone is reborn and the process starts over. Part of his plan also involves having a few different factions keep fighting with each other in different ways. The events of history that happens with each reset tends to be the same, but every now and then there is a different outcome here and there, even if it is small. And basically the game ends with them breaking free of the loop and basically having faith that they will find the answers to fix the situation that they're in by first finding planet Earth, which by doing so gives them a few extra 1,000 years to solve what is going on. It also ends with Cosmos floating above Earth, suggesting that the party does eventually find Earth sometime later. There is more details to all of this and more similarities between the two games, but this is basically the main point, the main idea behind the events of these two retellings, and as we can see, they are very similar to one another, though slightly different. So with all that said and all of this information presented, let's finally take a look at what Xenogears Part 6 could have talked about and shown with these two endings in mind. Let's start with the world ending point. Basically, that could mean that the world is literally set to end in this part of Xenogears, and it does, or it is saved by the party, but it could also mean that it's just the final chapter of Xenogears. Both of these points and all three options are actually what happens in Xenoblade 3, and given that it is a big point in Xenoblade 3, let's just say that it's basically going to be the same main points for Xenogears Part 6. But unlike Xenoblade and Xenosaga, we're not really sure if another universe was created by the experiments of the Zohar in Xenogears. So just to make this easier, we're gonna assume that there wasn't. So if no two universes are merging cause a destruction, what could have caused the destruction of the planet in Xenogears? We can say that it's the next big point, a lower power taking control of the universe, which in Xenoblade 3 is Zed and Mobius, and in Xenosaga is Wilhelm and the Testaments. The next point is, how do they save themselves? In Xenoblade it was with Origin, in Xenosaga it was the key that they hoped to find on the Lost Earth. So we can say that in Xenogears they would have made a device to reboot things as well, just like the other two endings. But what about the time frame? How long is it set after part 5? Honestly, it really doesn't matter as long as it starts soon after the end of Xenogears. It could be 5 years or even 100 years. Just as long as it's not thousands and thousands of years like it is compared to the other parts. There are more things we can point out as well to compare the three games and the three versions of Part 6, but let's just go into the full summary of what the original Xenogears Part 6 could have looked like. So with everything that we've talked about, here's what I think it would have looked like. The world of Xenogears was changed at the end of the game. The wave of existence, which is part of the higher power, was freed and went back to its dimension and do its thing. Faye and the rest of the party begin to lead a new world, and Barb probably does marry Maria, and I guess we can assume that they continue to rule Ave as elected officials, while Queen Zephyr continues to rule Shivat. Faye and Ellie probably have a kid, and in time the two nations live in harmony. But what happens next is that they end up finding out that some kind of cataclysm event is due to happen due to the Zohar and the DS system, which is basically bringing an end to their world. This event could be caused by leftover energy that was causing a shift of existence or of planes of their planet. But this event would also mean that the planet's composition would change and that humans would not survive the initial shift of their existence. So using the information technology they have, the two nations decide to work closer than before to find a way to survive this event, a way to make it so that they are able to walk in this new plane of existence, or a way to disperse the leftover energy from the Zohar and the DS system, allowing them to stay in their plane and planet and live. But there might be some tension on both sides and fears begin, and the nations try to keep the peace, and eventually they are able to build this device that will save them. And it might just be the one that allows them to live on a new plane by reincarnating their spirits back into their bodies after the shift. But as the event gets closer and closer, the tensions and fears grow to extreme lengths, and many people end up doubting if this device will even work. And some moral situations regarding the topic also rises. So when the worlds begin to shift, everything stops. A lower power that grew from their fears manifested and took control of the device, putting their spirits in an endless moment where this fear is what is ruled. and led to all-out war due to not being contained like it was in the material world. This endless moment is like a simulation, and over many reincarnations people forgot what happened. The lower power made it so that they never notice what's happening around them and just turned them into basically mindless slaves to feed into fear and power to keep it alive. But in the beginning, people knew what happened, and many people managed to escape the mind control but were still stuck in that loop. So they fought for centuries and learned that by becoming one with each other, two people fusing together to be one, similar to the two winged angels touching each other, joining each other as they fly, that is shown in Xenogears, they are then closer in power and strength to this lower power. And over time, the lower power plays out many things that is basically similar to what happened in the past, and some people do have faint memories of what happened in their past lives in this loop, and because of that they start to break free from it. They then try to free the other humans and try to take things back to how it was, but in this endless cycle, the lower power gets people to help them. The higher power does come back and help the humans change and to find a way to break out of that cycle, and they do. They shift planes and are able to be reincarnated on a new plane. Now, does this sound exactly like Xenoblade 3 and very similar to Xenosaga 3's ending? Yes, it really does, as I just talked about it. Those were the main points of Xenoblade 3 and Xenosaga 3. But that doesn't mean that it would all happen the exact same way in those two games in Xenogears Part 6. Just the main ideas and themes and concepts would be present, as we saw from all of the other Xeno games having the exact same ideas and themes and concepts from parts 1 through 5, which we've talked a lot about before in many other videos here. Especially on the 2-part video essay where I talk about every single Xeno game up to Xenoblade 3 is a retelling of this story. So in a way, I guess, like I said, this is part 3 of that video as well. So while all of this does seem like just a summary of Xenoblade 3 and Xenosaga 3, it's also very interesting to see how this particular story could have played out in the world of Xenogears and with those characters. But keep in mind, while Takahashi probably did have more of a general idea of the final part of Xenogears that he just decided not to write in the Perfect Works book, the idea of that story was really not fully developed yet, which is why I think he decided to leave out more information, even if he had more to say. This can be further proven by the slight changes in motives of the villains from Xenosaga 3 and Xenoblade 3 and how certain things ended, again because they're very slightly different from one another. Especially when this change though is only really noticeable with part 6, because when you look at the other parts of Perfect Works story, it's not really changed that much between each retelling of the story, and it seems like the biggest change really was the ending, even if it's just in some slight touches here and there, which makes sense as the ending again was developed very quickly in Xenosaga 3, and I'm sure that given these facts, Xenoblade 3's and Xenosaga 3's extended main plots might not have been what it would have been in the original part 6, other than what is stated in part 6. Because at that particular moment, Takahashi probably had many different ideas, but at the same time, I'm sure that many of those ideas and themes that were in the two endings that we got were also already set and planned for Xenogears Part 6. But there might have been a lot that he just was undecided on, as he was still trying to figure out how to best conclude the story in Part 6. So yeah, we don't fully know. This is really just a fun essay in thinking what Xenogears Part 6 could have looked like based off of the two slightly different versions we got of that part. Keep in mind, there's also so many references to Xenogears in Xenoblade 3, way more than any of the other games as well. So it's also very easy to see how Xenoblade 3 was a love letter to the original game and its story, while also concluding that story via Xenoblade's retelling of the Perfect Works story, which I again have said in a couple other videos I like to call as the Klaus Saga. And because of that, as a love letter to everything he has made before, I thought it would be fun to think about this topic with more details than we've ever had before. I was also really surprised to see that in a way we did have part 6 shown to us a very long time ago, even though it was a rushed and kind of a draft of the actual ending that we got with Xenoblade 3. But again, this further proves that up to Xenoblade 3, all Xeno games are retellings of the Perfect Works story. And if this is how Perfect Works would have concluded in the original Xenogears Part 6, based off of Xeno Saga 3 and Xenoblade 3, honestly, I think it would have been an amazing ending just like the one we got for both games. Though I still do kind of prefer the ending to Xenoblade 3 rather than Xeno Saga 3. But anyway, if it was not how part 6 was supposed to look like at all, then the question would still basically remain. Just how different would all of this be? But that is all for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry I'm speaking a lot faster. Today's just been a very tiring day, and my throat is and my voice is just very tired because of work, because I have to talk a lot at work. So I'm very sorry my voice is more deep, more raspy, and more breathy than usual. I'm just very tired. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what your thoughts are, if you do think Xenoblade 3 and Xeno Saga 3 both retell part 6, or if you think it's only Xenoblade 3. Did you guys ever feel like Xeno Saga 3 ever retold part 6 like I didn't? Because I thought it was only parts 1 through 3. So did you ever think Xeno Saga 3 was telling part 6 at all? If so, just let me know. I'm very curious to hear what you guys think about that, because I never really saw anyone else comment on this, and I only realized this when I was responding to a few comments on my previous video. But with all that said, guys, again, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Rate, comment, subscribe, and I do have a few more Xenoblade videos to make, and a few Xeno videos to make as a whole too. But yeah, I'm excited to hear your thoughts. So thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.